Counterpoints Friday crew is here on a Saturday. We recorded a video yesterday that had some audio problems, but it was as the Twitter saga with Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi was unfolding. And now actually we have all of the tweets from Matt Taibbi regarding the so-called secret Twitter files. What happened basically is yesterday, Elon Musk tweeted in the afternoon that around 5 p.m. he would be releasing information showing how Twitter censored or suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story back in 2020, October of 2020. 5 p.m. rolled around Eastern time. There was nothing, but Elon Musk said that he was checking some facts, and within 40 minutes, there would be some tweets starting. About 90 minutes after that, Matt Taibbi comes and unrolls just an amazing thread with all of this insight into the process of how the Hunter Biden story, we now know because of Matt's reporting, got censored from Twitter by Twitter in 2020 without the knowledge of Jack Dorsey, one of the huge subplots of this entire story. It's now Saturday morning. We have all of the tweets, and we could sort of take the information as we have it in full. Matt says there is more to come. Ryan, though, what were some of your big takeaways from the last 24 hours?
So what Matt reveals here seems in some ways to undercut the most, let's say, extreme suspicions among some in the Trump camp. So the Trump camp or people around them, really suspected that the FBI may have had a hand in pressuring Twitter to take the story down. Now, some of that comes from just kind of general suspicion of the FBI and some of the agents, a hot, adversarial posture toward the Trump administration or toward the Trump campaign in 2016. Some of it also comes from that Mark Zuckerberg interview that he did with Joe Rogan, where he said that they had been warned over the summer, vaguely by federal officials that Russia might try to hack some materials and dump them to influence the election, which, I don't think anybody needs, the FBI to privately tell them that, right? Like that's a thing that Russia tries to do. That's a thing that a lot of different countries try to do. Russia, it kind of specializes in it, but lots of countries try to monkey around in the elections of other countries. And that's a major way to do it. You hack information and then you leak it. It's one of the most standard at this point intelligence crafts out there. And so what we did learn from Taibbi's reporting is that Twitter did get, according to his reporting, Twitter did get that same warning that there would be to be on the lookout for potentially hacked documents, coming from foreign government actors. But what Taibbi also finds is that he sees no evidence so far in anything that he's seen in Twitter's files that the FBI pressured, or the Biden camp, in fact, pressured to have the New York Post story, just completely removed from the website. What he finds is that the kind of culture inside Twitter didn't require that type of pressure, that the employees and executives and lawyers at Twitter were going to do that themselves. Now, when it came to some Biden campaign requests, it does seem that those all were related to kind of, basically, what would you call them? Explicit photos of Hunter Biden.
Right, you can see those up on the screen here. This list of tweets on number 8. Matt is saying, by 2020, requests from connected actors connected to the Biden campaign, that is, to delete tweets, were routine, and people have gone to the Internet Archives and looked at what those tweets are. A lot of them are pictures of Hunter Biden's genitals or Hunter Biden engaged in sexual activity. In fact, all of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tweets, I think like 3 of them are one you can't find. So a lot of them were explicit material. And I do think Twitter allows explicit material in some form, or did at the time.
But not like revenge porn.
Right.
Like if it's consensual. Twitter allows like consensual stuff.
Right, exactly.
But you can't like take somebody's photos, even if you say obtain them as a journalist. They're not going to allow. Like I'm pretty absolutist when it comes to free speech, but even I'm like, all right, yeah, like that a company ought to just take down if there's a request from the person whose explicit photos are being posted. They should they should take that down. I think that's
Yeah.
reasonable.
No,
But what we're
100%.
really
And
talking
there
about is
was
the
an implication
story.
and there was an implication in one of those tweets that someone looked at on the Internet Archive and found that there was an implication in the tweet that Hunter Biden was with somebody underage. So it was obviously like in Twitter's interest. And that, by the way, is why the FEC ended up finding out that Twitter was not, or ended up determining that what Twitter and Facebook did when the story came out was not a violation of policy, because they said it was in Twitter's commercial interest to suppress those stories and was not expressly political, because the commercial interest basically trumped the political in that case, which I think is a very interesting sort of determination. But Ryan,
As if there's some distinction.
Right, exactly. And that's a distinction that FEC wants them wants to muddle anyway. So moving on, there's so much in these tweets, which I don't know what your overall take is on them. I don't necessarily see a bombshell in here, but I do see a lot of interesting pieces of this puzzle and a lot of insights into the process that I think confirm prior assumptions about what was happening behind closed doors at Twitter, and confirm sort of prior suspicions, and honestly things that we kind of already knew, that there was just a kind of a haplessness at Twitter. But this example right here, you can see on the screen, Kayleigh McEnany was locked out of her account for tweeting about the story. Trump campaign staffer seethes at Twitter. That's Matt's word. And that causes a firestorm inside Twitter. You can see that in tweet 20. Public Twitter executive trying to figure out what on earth is going on. Ryan, what does this exchange tell us, if anything, about what was happening inside Twitter HQ?
It's pretty extreme for a private company to block a White House spokesperson from tweeting a public link to an article in a major newspaper. That it's later described as what do they call it, the Access Hollywood, like Tech's Access Hollywood moment.
Yeah.
Because it's so extreme, and it produced, and as to IEB reports, it produced significant blowback on Capitol Hill. There's later a report from a lobbyist that says they met with, I think, 8 or 9 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and all of them were absolutely fuming. And one was calling it an Access Hollywood moment, saying that tech has gone so far that it has shown that they can't regulate themselves. Like, a private company really should not be able to tell the White House what it can or cannot say. That's up to the voters in a democracy. And later, this question of McEnany's account rises to an attorney and to some other executives at Twitter, and they get the exchange, and they say, look, this account, and they keep using this like formulaic language, like this account. It's like, no, it's White House spokesperson,
right?
Or let's go with that. It says this account shared banned material, and they have not deleted it. As soon as they delete this, then they can have their account back. It's like holding the account of the White House spokesperson hostage in order to pressure them into deleting something is just rather extreme. Despite the fact that, as TIB reports, people were inside Twitter were realizing quite early that they had screwed this up. But it seemed like there was nobody who had the gumption to kind of make the call, and you end up getting a bunch of people saying, well, caution is needed. Taibbi quotes one person saying they just freelanced it. Hacking was the excuse, but within a few hours, pretty much everyone realized that wasn't going to hold, but no one had the guts to reverse it. And they keep saying, well, who knows? It might be hacked, it might not, but given the stakes, we need to take caution. Do you have there's a couple of emails that say that. Do you see any of those?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing I think is really
Oh, here's one, 26. Do you want to read that one?
Yep, I'll bring that up. But that's one of the things that's interesting to me is how they end up. Here it is. They end up saying we're erring on the side of caution. Essentially, this is Yoel Roth, who Elon Musk actually let go. And one of the things that I think is really worth keying in on is the invocation of 2016 right here. Because after the Kayleigh McEnany thing inside, what we're learning from the emails that Taibbi reported out, after the Kayleigh McEnany thing becomes an issue, they land on this excuse that it's a violation of their hacked policies information, their hacked information policy, hacked materials policy, which I believe, Ryan, this, when you put it together with this invocation of 2016, smacks very clearly of wanting to avoid the opprobrium that establishment Democrats directed at social media platforms after the WikiLeaks emails were dumped into public in 2016. Do you get the same impression?
That seems right. It seems like a response to 2016. Like, how are we going to handle this going forward? And and press freedom advocates and us over at The Intercept, we're consistently saying, like, you cannot comport a hacked policy with the First Amendment and with journalism. And actually, you want Bro Khanna to explain this? He comes out of this kind of looking better than anybody else in the entire batch. He emails on October 14th, generating huge backlash on Hill re-speech. Happy to chat if you're up for it. Best Ro, reaching out to a Twitter executive. Ro Khanna is a member of a Democrat who represents Silicon Valley, so he understands Silicon Valley and also would have contacts there already. In the next tweet, they have the reply, which is the guy just gets into the details. The press secretary's account was not permanently deleted. We requested that she delete the tweet containing material that is in violation of our rules, and her account is restricted until she complies.
It was just outrageously
insane. So Khanna then, as Taibbi says, Khanna tries to reroute the conversation to the First Amendment, mention of which is generally hard to find in the files. And I'll read this, because this really gets at, I think, my take on this too. And he had it in the moment, and good for him. He says, this seems a violation of First Amendment principles. If there is a hack of classified information or other information that could expose a serious war crime, and the New York Times was to publish it, I think the New York Times should have that right. A journalist should not be held accountable for the illegal actions of the source unless they actively aided the hack. So to restrict the distribution of that material, especially regarding a presidential candidate, seems not in the keeping of the principles of New York Times v. Sullivan. I say this as a total Biden partisan and convinced he didn't do anything wrong, unquote. And then he goes on, but the story now has become more about censorship than relatively innocuous emails, and it's become a bigger deal than it would have been. It also is now leading to serious efforts to curtail Section 230, many of which would have been a mistake. So that would kind of cut against the idea that this was in Twitter's commercial interest if they're screwing up so badly that they're now going to take on additional regulatory risks. And Khanna says this, and I'm curious for your take. He says, I believe Twitter itself should curtail what it recommends or puts in trending news, and your policy against QAnon groups is all good. It's a hard balance. But in the heat of a presidential campaign, restricting dissemination of newspaper articles, even if New York Post is far right, seems like it will invite more backlash than it will do good. Please keep this communication between just you and Jack, and no need to CC the team or forward to them. Just wanted to offer my 2 cents. So what did you take from the Ro Khanna's intervention here?
Agree with basically every word of it. And I'm curious why. I don't know what he was saying publicly at the time. It's kind of hard to reverse and go look at that. And I'll be curious to go look probably right after we wrap. But it's interesting that he wanted the communication to stay between them, because it is so robust and articulate and constructive in this case. I think if it were made publicly, it would have been powerful. Matt says this is the only Democrat he could find. And bear in mind, again, this is more context that Matt noted, this is on day one. Ro Khanna is not, he is not hesitating. He's not wavering. This is on day one. And you would think there would be more members of the sort of old ACLU wing of the Democratic Party who would have had the same sentiment and who would have immediately been in communication with Twitter about it, because we all know they have channels to Twitter. Again, partially thanks to Matt's reporting, it's not unusual for any campaign or any politician to have channels to Twitter, because Twitter has public policy folks that are constantly in communication with them. But I think this should have been a consensus sentiment on both the right and the left.
Yes, for sure. And instead, as it rises up the chain in Twitter, and as the time goes on, the lawyers continue to kind of double down. Here's one where Taibbi writes that one of them wrote that the First Amendment isn't absolute, and they ended up wanted more moderation.
That's right. The First Amendment isn't absolute, 36. More moderation. And yeah, the question then that's also interesting to me is whether they think this is in their commercial interest, or if they're just so scarred by the backlash they got from 2016, and so eager to avoid that same deluge of criticism from powerful people, Hillary Clinton, Biden campaign, the Sunday news shows, cable news, etc., that they erred, as Yoel Roth said, on the side of suppression.
Yeah, and so then here's another email that went out to a bunch of people that starts. I'll just read it. As you're probably aware, Twitter actioned tweets yesterday relating to 2 New York Post articles that were tweeted out that allegedly included pictures and screenshots of emails from a laptop that allegedly belonged to Hunter Biden, presidential candidate Joe Biden's son. Our teams made the determination that the materials fall under our hacked materials policy in addition to sharing personal information, so links were actioned. As you may know, and here's what refers to what you were saying earlier. As you may know, the existing policy framework was launched in 2018 to mitigate real-time harm based on hack and leak scenarios coming out of the 2016 election. So that's them saying that, yes, they put this policy into place in 2018 in direct response to the WikiLeaks reporting on John Podesta's emails, which are said to have come, from a Russian hack of John Podesta's emails. I actually think that it is true. Like the evidence seems really strong. That seems like a controversial thing to say. I don't quite understand why. Like there is, and I know there's some wild theories out there about other ways that Podesta's emails got out, but it seems pretty conclusive that that Russia did that.
He was fished. He clicked
right. He was fished. He changed his password. Don't click a link in your Gmail. Like don't do that. Don't change your password in Gmail. Don't do it.
I have that
DMs
policy.
Yeah.
Anytime I get an email from you, I have that policy because it's just a fish video 9 times out of 10.
Yes. And don't change your email in order to watch a fish video. Do not do that. But I reported on those emails. You probably reported on those. Everybody reported on those emails. Like we can condemn hacking generally, but once the information is in public, it's incumbent on journalists to report on that information, and that has always been the understanding of the First Amendment, and that's what Khanna is pointing to there. So Twitter saying that they have a hacked materials policy, would have meant, did Edward Snowden hack the NSA? I mean, sort of. Like he didn't, because hacking has a very broad definition.
Well,
it means basically basically means cyber access that is illicit, and he did not have permission to download all that stuff and release it. So is that a hack, even though he's a contractor?
Well, no, we see this happening in the Assange case. It's powerful. People will expand the definition of what hacking is and what illegal activity is to constitute illegal activity when they want to. When they want to prove their point, then they can wield that definition as they please. And so it ends up being a pretty messy situation because they're wielding it to undercut basically the effects after things are dumped into public of journalism on those things.
So the last question, the kind of Democrats seem to be, I'm hearing a lot of people call this a nothing burger, which it's adding new information about a historical moment. It's a nothing burger only in the sense that it does not fundamentally change what the conventional understanding of the way that Twitter handled this was. Like, in other words, Twitter handled this publicly. Like, they publicly nuked the New York Post's articles and wouldn't allow them to be shared. Like, yes, it's true, we all knew that, but there were questions about who made that decision, how it was made, how executives inside responded to it, and whether or not there was pressure from the Biden campaign or from law enforcement. And so we have a lot of answers to those questions now as a result of this reporting. So it seems a little ungenerous to call it nothing burger. I mean, what's your take on the kind of Democratic response to it so far?
Yeah, I've seen a response that says, they were really in the right to do this in the moment because Rudy Giuliani had basically presented the New York Post with the contents of a hard drive that had been ran. Like, the story was spectacular of how the laptop came to be in possession of the New York Post. And I don't know, again, this is one of those things where it's really hard to replay the clock and know exactly in real time what Twitter knew about the origins of the laptop as it was happening, because actually really nothing here was hacked. He left his laptop, and legally the policy was that if you left your laptop over the certain course of time, and his accounts may have been hacked, that's not necessarily the same thing, but it's true that he left his laptop at the store, and by the policy it becomes the property of the laptop repair shop in Delaware randomly. I mean, it was just such a spectacular story. And so I have seen people on the left say, what did you expect? Like, what do you expect from Twitter in this extremely high pressure moment when you have somebody with as little credibility as Rudy Giuliani coming onto the scene suddenly and with an October surprise? And I just don't think that holds up, because you see in these emails, and that's why, again, I don't like the nothing burger characterization. You see in these emails their pushback against the Khanna argument. And Ro Khanna is coming to them and basically privately helping them kind of work through this and understand it in the context of American history and constitutional law. And they push back on that because I think they really do have this muscle memory from 2016. They're just really terrified about the elite backlash. Should there be another situation like WikiLeaks, they're just really, really scared of that, and they are distrustful of things, more distrustful of things that are published in the New York Post than, because it leans right, than they would be if they made it into another news outlet, frankly. And so I think the process insights are really valuable. It's very newsworthy that Jack Dorsey had been cut out of this in the very early decision-making process. I think it's very newsworthy to see them pushing back on Congressman Khanna, and to see exactly how they reacted to people's complaints about the McEnany block. I mean, I think this is very valuable information.
Yeah, and I think we could knock. Let me see if I can find Elon Musk here. Where's his there's some criticism from Musk here. He comes after so basically the Biden campaign reaches out and flags those explicit photos, and Twitter responds back, handled. And Elon Musk is like, look, this is a violation of the First Amendment, failing to realize that I guess that the Biden campaign at that point was not the Biden administration.
Right.
And also there is, I would say there's some line between kind of explicit information and not explicit information. So I think Musk kind of stepped on his own story here a little bit by kind of getting ahead of it, because to me the story speaks for itself and doesn't.
That, by the way, is his pinned tweet right now. You can see it up on the screen. That the handled, he put handled in quotes. Go ahead.
Oh, here, yeah, and under that he says, yeah, if this isn't a violation of the Constitution's First Amendment, what is it? It's like, you have a lot of data points here to make strong arguments without just jumping out and being wrong. Now there is, I think people are being a little too cavalier about the distinction between a presidential campaign and the government. Like, it's true that a presidential campaign is not a government, but
the former vice president has a government office.
Former vice president, and so it's not like it's It's not like it's just me reaching out. Like it's somebody who might soon be in government. It's the leader of a party that does have power. Like at the time, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. They have plenty of members elected to the Senate at that time. So it's not quite that a presidential campaign is a fully just private citizen. But also, if they're reaching out to say, hey, can you take these explicit pics off? It's like, well, are we really going to knock them for that? Whereas you have a much more interesting story than that, and he seems to really want to kind of shoehorn it into something different.
Yeah, and I
not
have
different,
seen,
but more broad.
I've seen criticism of both Musk and Matt saying they're putting all of this attention into alleged censorship from a presidential campaign. And what Matt did was say, the Trump campaign made these similar requests to Twitter too, where they asked for things basically to be handled, to borrow a quote. And so why would Matt downplay what was coming from the actual government at the time? And why would Elon Musk downplay what was coming from the actual government at the time, and focus so much on what's coming from somebody who's not even president yet? And I think the obvious answer to that is this isn't just about the handle. Like that's why I think Elon Musk zeroing in on this as a violation of the First Amendment isn't helpful to the actual, like to what we're really getting out of value in the story, which is about the New York Post. It's about how Twitter treated journalism, as opposed to, I think the treatment of Kayleigh McEnany's account was absurd, but I think it's even more absurd for Twitter to suppress an October piece of journalism that was unfavorable, by haplessly kind of landing on this hack policy, hack materials policy. That's what's really ridiculous, and that I think is the strongest case to emerge from the Twitter files, as there will become to be known as they are now in a legend of the Twitter files. That's the big thing from my perspective.
Yeah, and to me, it's just not Twitter's place. Like at a bare minimum, they have to trust news organizations to be able to publish news. Like
right, yeah, exactly.
If they want to become a news publisher, then go ahead and become a news publisher and go do that.
They
but
claim
that's not
they're
what they
not.
are.
That's
right.
The thing is, like, they claim in order to get Section 230 protections, they explicitly claim not to be publishers. But by becoming these massive companies, they have directly and intentionally put themselves in the position of being publishers. There's absolutely no way around that legally. That's what we're seeing here is editorial decisions, the kind you and I make, Ryan.
Yeah, right. And then they have to just trust journalists to make those decisions. It really shouldn't be up to them. What stories the New York Post is allowed to share and what they're not allowed to share. And as I recall, their Twitter handle was like nuked for weeks because they refused to delete on principle, stories, posts that shared their story.
Right, ahead of the election.
Which is just appalling.
Yeah, I agree. And the last thing I'll say is that Matt is saying there's much more to come. You can see this on the screen here. He's saying basically, there's way more to come on some of this stuff. This isn't the end of it. It's been a whirlwind 96 hours for me, but there's more to come on shadow banning, follower counts, the fate of individual accounts, and they are not limited to the political right. So that'll be interesting. And Elon Musk has promised part 2 of the Twitter files is coming today. So apparently we'll be in for a lot more kind of insights into the process. But maybe the bottom line is just really that what everyone suspected was happening behind closed doors at Twitter, that you have this small company that grew into a juggernaut that controls so much of the elite discourse, really having no competence or ability to coherently and confidently handle an extremely important question, despite the fact that they had years to prepare for something like that. Yeah,
well, looking forward to Twitter Files number 2 coming up later. So we'll have more on it, I'm sure, next time we're back. But thanks for joining us here on a Counterpoints Saturday, I guess.
If it's Saturday, it's Counterpoints Friday.
That's right.
See you soon.